Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to yet more Warhammer 40k lore, where today we're going to be looking into an interesting, albeit somewhat unusual topic, the QOrl Swarmhood, one of the minor factions in Warhammer 40k that has not received the attention that they so richly deserve. But before that, we have something else also worthy of your attention. Raid Shadow Legends, the famous mobile and PC strategy game with over 500 champions and dozens of dungeons, faction crypts, campaign missions, and adventures for you to explore. Today, we have some champion spotlights for you, starting with Elder Skarg, a recent acquisition for my own account. He has been doing fantastic work in the Spider Dungeon, where he has the ability to affect both the boss and all of the little spiderlings with a constant ticking HP burn effect. Up next we have Vergunka, an absolutely adorable mass of personalized fat reservoirs and scales. Strapped to his back is everything your team is going to need to keep their sustain up in the harshest of fights, with healing and defensive attributes as well as the ability to debuff all enemy provoke actions, ensuring that your champions get to attack the enemy they want to. And finally, the Abyss. She may not be as cute as the massive, fluffy pack mule we just saw, but she is the favoured champion for PvPers, as her third skill has the incredible ability to scale its damage along with the target's attack or defense, making her the perfect counter to your enemy's big, bad, and tooled-up super champion. Personally, I've been enjoying my time beating the crap out of the clan bosses, because like all human beings, I like big numbers, and Mr. Punching Bag here can be squeezed for very large numbers indeed. There was also a recent update to the game introducing new and improved clan mechanics, both quests and the clan shop, giving more rewards and incentives than ever to being a part of a clan. And if you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description below, and you will receive 200,000 silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard, which you can use to summon an epic champion all of your own. And to top it all off, you will also receive the epic hero Shonuru. Please be aware that this offer is for new players only. All of these rewards can be found up here in your inbox when you enter the game. Now then, the QOrl, a highly intelligent insectoid species with a significantly sized empire in Segmentum Pacificus, just a hop, skip, and a jump or two away from holy Terra itself. It is probably by far the greatest Xenos threat to the Imperium in the entire galaxy. And yet, we know next to nothing about them. In fact, what little we do know comes from an anatomical study book from back in the day when GW still released pure fluff books. It was perhaps expected by many that the QOrl would be the next big thing to be added into the 41st millennium, as their entrance onto the grand stage was teased and suggested here and there. For example, the biggest weakness of the QOrl race was that they did not possess warp drive technology, which of course severely limited their ability to expand across the galaxy. But apparently, they had started to figure ways around this, seizing Imperial tech and even mind-breaking Imperial navigators by using brain-controlling bugs. Goody, goody indeed. Unfortunately, new factions have not been added to 40k essentially since the 3rd edition back in, 1998? Yes, for anyone still holding out hope, I'd probably stop if I were you. Not that I don't understand mind, because I'm on your side here. The QOrl would have been an excellent, true Xeno species to add to the ranks of the 41st millennium, because a lot of the Xeno species are, well, humans with slightly different builds and skin colors. Not necessarily all that interesting, frankly, nor are they really truly grand-scale threats or competitors on the galactic scheme of things. The Eldar are a dying race of pale, tall humanoids that waffle across the galaxy, just desperately trying to not be eaten by everything hostile out there. The Tau are a species of blue humanoids that are supposed to be a new, fresh, vibrant and up-and-coming player on the galactic scale, but they possess an absolutely minuscule empire that is already being riven apart by internal schisms, and they're currently caught between the Imperium and the Tyranids. They are going to need all the plot armor they can muster just simply to survive, frankly. Then there's the Orcs, which are big, green humanoids, far too divided internally to ever form a proper threat to anything. Their grandest achievement in recent lore history is getting their biggest, baddest boy, Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka, decapitated by the last Space Wolf, after which his head was simply just sewn right back on again. Anywho, then there's the Necrons, which, again, are frankly little more than plot points. Oh, they'll pop up whenever a writer thinks it convenient to introduce these spooky, scary space skeletons. But beyond that, they're all too sleepy to really do much of anything, frankly. Except potentially screwing over the Tau's ambitions, as, I forgot to mention, the mini-Tau Empire is right next to one of the largest and most powerful Necron dynasties. You can feel the plot armor thickening even as the words leave my mouth. And again, I'd like to point out that all of these Xeno species are basically just humans with slightly different builds and skin colors. The only genuinely, absolutely alien threat is probably the Tyranids, and they've somewhat fallen foul of the writing trap inherent in a grim, dark universe. If everything is always balanced at the very tippy-topmost edge of annihilation, if there really are massive Tyranid hive fleets coming in from above, from below, from the left, from the right, and the entire universe outside of the galaxy is filled with Tyranid beasties, then you can't really do anything with it. That's the problem. If you advance the storyline when you are on the brink of annihilation, the only thing you can do is either end times it all, which wasn't a particularly great idea when they did it to Warhammer, or pull back from the precipice, which is what we're currently seeing with the whole god-awful rift thing, where chaos created a rift across the entire galaxy. Danger! Horror! What's that? A Primarch has returned and is leading a Legion-sized crusade across the stars? He's invading the realms of chaos? Rightio then, it seems we're back to 30k once more. Yes, this is one of the reasons why I have been so insistent that no, don't make GW advance the plotline, cause, well, they're not good enough to advance it in a way that wouldn't be awful. Anywho, a bit of a long-winded intro there, but the idea of an actual proper alien Xenos insectoid species that also is somewhat hauntingly reminiscent of the Imperium of Man would have been a fantastic addition to the 41st millennium. So let's talk about the QOrl Swarmhood, shall we? As the name implies, they are a swarmdom, an absolute monarchy ruled over by a single dominant queen, and potentially lower hierarchical castes of local queens that rule over smaller segments of the overall empire. Kind of like colonial governors in a way. Though again, I use the word queens to point out that they are probably individuals with egg-laying capacities. Resist the urge to make the joke there. But there is only ever one supreme ruler of the swarmdom, the absolute queen to whom every other single individual in the entire species owe absolute unyielding fealty. And this loyalty is not guaranteed by the whiplash, by the pistol, or the fist. It is guaranteed by a combination of pheromone traces and mental domination. Undoubtedly, there are a fair few other mechanics at work here as well, since controlling an entire species scattered over a vast interplanetary area via scent obviously comes with some pretty big hurdles to be crossed. This is another reason why there must absolutely be several other sub-queens as well, capable of extending the main queen's area of influence across the vast insectoid hordes. Another reason why we can also be pretty damn certain that there are probably tens of thousands of lesser queens as well is the birthrates. One queen can lay 1,000 eggs per day, which sounds impressive until you realize that's only about 365,000 eggs per year, nowhere even remotely close to running an interplanetary empire. In fact, it's absolutely nothing. To give you a point of reference here, let's say that a QOrl queen can lay 400,000 eggs a year. Let's bump up the number a little bit. There are currently 385,000 babies born on Earth each and every single day. Yeah. The whole 1,000 eggs per day isn't so impressive anymore, is it? In fact, you would need 385 queens just to match the population increase of current day Earth. So for the QOrl's sake, I hope they have a lot of princesses. But if we do indeed make the seemingly reasonable leap of logic that a interplanetary empire would have more than one breeder, then you come to realize just how frighteningly vast the QOrl's numbers could swiftly become. Never mind a few hundred queens, what if there is 1,000 queens on a single planet, laying 1,000,000 eggs each and every day? Each egg being able to grow up into anything the colony needs right then. Workers, soldiers, or even more queens. Theoretically then, a QOrl world could bump up production, both of further worker drones or soldiers, to meet almost any demand. If they need a vast increase in the number of soldiers to fight a defensive campaign, 1,000,000 soldier eggs can be laid every day for however long is required. And whereas it takes a solid decade or two to make a human into a warrior, a bug, I imagine, would only require a few months to hatch, if even that. Simultaneously, presuming that the needs for foodstuff and raw materials can be met, a world can simply continue to produce workers to staff near infinite production lines. A world could potentially overnight ship off all of its soldiers to war, and then almost immediately repopulate itself with workers to produce the weapons and ammunitions required by those soldiers. Terrifying prospect indeed for any minor nearby Xenos nations. Imagine being invaded by 10 million warrior bugs, all carrying heavy weaponry too, mind you, and then when you finally defeated them all, another 10 million simply appear. And so it goes until every ounce of resistance has been crushed beneath an endless weight of insectoid invaders. And as a note on their weaponry too, although very, very little is known of it, the QOrl apparently favour heavier pieces. Their ships carry a great deal of heavy ordnance, and their warriors too. If I were to be a little speculative here, and sticking with the theme of an insectoid, ant-like race, I would imagine heavy cannons firing hyper-velocity shards or spikes, for example, possibly envenomed. A small take out of the Dark Eldar playbook, perhaps. Crystalline entities that shatter upon impact, or maybe energy weapons that kind of look like stingers, bursts of green light, or more venom-looking things, but it's getting to sound a little bit too tyrannidy, honestly. I prefer the idea of actual spikes. Now, it feels, at that, like an insectoid weapon, a biological spike, right? But instead of that, have it be an actual metal spike, a technological construct, something crafted and made for a weapon that is designed to almost kind of mimic, perhaps, the natural weapons of the QOrl instead. A QOrl soldier may have a stinger, but using that for a biological weapon, again, would be a little bit too tyrannidy. But having it have a projectile weapon that mimics the nature of its natural weapon, that sounds somewhat more interesting. And on the note of weaponry as well, I mentioned their ships. This is one of the few points of true and proper contact that the Imperium have had with the QOrl, as they have on multiple occasions observed their chain ships. Chain ships. It's in the name, isn't it? Apparently these are huge, conglomerate amorphous forms of various QOrl vessels, ginormous rocks, or in one particularly intriguing mention, supposedly their ships are created from the bodies of their own dead. Ooh. That's a cool idea, isn't it? And it also fits in quite well with the idea of QOrl ancestor worship, but we'll get back to that in a second. For now, the chain ships are, as the name implies, made up of several smaller component parts, and these component parts are apparently almost fully independent spaceships in their own right. So that if they are under attack and they don't feel like they can fight off their opponent, they can actually separate the individual pieces and send them scurrying off in all directions. An excellent way to avoid a superior opponent, and I also imagine a fantastic way to custom make vessels. Say, for example, that you need an invasion vessel, capable of seeding an enemy planet with billions of warriors in drop pods. You'll make a chain ship equipped solely for this purpose, actually 100% specialized to carrying life support, carrying mess halls, carrying food, carrying, of course, the delivery system to place them down on the planet's surface. And then you create another escort vessel, which is absolutely bristling with heavy bombardment weaponry, perhaps also with vast hangars capable of deploying attack wings of strike craft, and preferably also some way of supplying the troops down on the ground. Vast armory stuffed full of weapons and ammunition, alongside huge bulk landers capable of carrying it all down to the surface below. And obviously, you are also going to have to provide all of these troops with some protection too. Even bigger chain ships bristling with weaponry, perhaps yet again further specialized, some made for close-in boarding actions, others carrying long-range weaponry, like torpedoes or missiles. Yes, I do like the idea of chain ships quite a lot. Now, this of course also leads us back to the itsy-bitsy problem that the QOrl haven't figured out warp travel yet. And that is a major issue, because the galaxy, as it turns out, is pretty goddamn big. And so despite having expanded quite aggressively and continuously for the near entire existence of their species, the QOrl are still only in possession of a relatively small empire. Oh, well, I say relatively small in comparison to the Imperium of Man. They are an absolutely hilariously enormous empire by any other metric, so I guess we can't really call them too tiny, can we? But the inability to travel faster than light reliably has been a severe dampener on their expansion, and also limits the areas in which they can expand. They cannot, for example, jump the galactic arms as easily as all of the other races, which means that they are pretty much bound to going one out of two ways, which can in turn also make it a hell of a lot easier for other species to bottleneck them up and prevent them from expanding yet further. If the Imperium wanted to truly screw over the QOrl, they could simply just create a fortified line of worlds to their immediate north and south, relatively speaking, and bleed them dry of resources. The QOrl may be able to produce a near infinite number of drones and soldiers, etc., but they still need to feed all of them. They still need to arm all of them, and they still need the resources to produce those weapons. The smaller an area of the galaxy they are allowed to inhabit, the smaller a total pool of these resources will be available to them. And in their own way, the QOrl have realized this as well. They have developed an incredibly aggressive culture of absolute superiority. The QOrl are of the opinion that they are the true rulers of the entire galaxy, and all other creatures are frankly beneath them. It is their right to simply spread across the galaxy however they may wish, and make use of all of its various resources to continue this purpose. Sounds somewhat reminiscent of another empire long, long ago, doesn't it? Though to be fair, it is also pretty much the only valid survival strategy in a galaxy like 40k. If you are literally surrounded by murderous, rapacious, and often hungry alien species, your only real option is eat them before they eat you. Because if they get more planets before you do, well, now you are at a severe resource disadvantage. I hope you enjoy being dinner. And it's not like the QOrl have given this a lot of philosophical thought either. This is very much so an instinctual reaction to an extraordinarily hostile galaxy. The QOrl are very intelligent in a manner of speaking. They have clearly developed space travel. They have clearly developed a way to cross between planets, itself an incredibly complicated feat. And they have obviously developed a vast array of heavy weaponry and huge high worlds where they can store their dead and also live. They must also have created vast agricultural complexes to feed the unfathomable, innumerable billions of their species, or alternatively, GW simply hasn't thought that far ahead. That's another explanation, but charitability and all that. And they have also created a society with a fundamental, albeit exceptionally rudimentary form of writing and information transfer, based upon mathematical formulas in relations to their own biological being and livelihood, which is rather interesting. A species that base their entire point of view of the world entirely on themselves, their own outlook, their own forms, and their own way of interacting with the wider galaxy. Which is another reason why I'm so fascinated by the QOrl, because they are an actually alien Xeno species, rather than just prettier humans that live in boats that traverse space. And on that note as well, I said I would return to the idea of them building their spaceships and their buildings from their own dead. Because this is quite interesting and very much so in line with their apparently self-centered worldview. I mean, that's a term for it, but I think we need something a little bit more extreme to do it real justice. If they base their entire society upon themselves, after all, small wonder they're literally creating crafts and homes from their dead. It was mentioned that it was a form of ancestral worship. Since the average drone only lives on for about 10 years, they take a great deal of pride in replacing their predecessor and continuing on his task, no matter how menial or basic it may be. Simply cleaning out the gutters could be a generational labor for the QOrl, something that they take a great deal of pride in simply because generations of QOrls previously have done the task as well. And that is another, albeit less plausible, suggestion too, that upon death, all QOrl, every single last member of their society, is brought back to the home world of Lokit, where they are lovingly interned, as it says, in vast structures. Their homeworld has essentially become one enormous mausoleum for their own dead and those who have passed away, as at this point there must be uncountable trillions of dead QOrl on the planet, which introduces some logistical problems, doesn't it? Could you even have enough space for that? I suppose if you simply pile one upon the other for long enough, the sheer weight of the other corpses would crush the ones below. Now that is, again, isn't that a beautifully alien concept? A planet so thoroughly covered by the dead that they have literally created a crust of their own atomized ancestors upon which they simply heap new waves of dead. I mean, if we are assuming, reasonably so, that the QOrl civilization at this point must number in the trillions, how many millions of dead must be deposited on this planet every single day? Oh, that is cool. That is morbidly fascinating, isn't it? The more and more I talk about this, the more and more I really want this to be an actual faction, but the more and more I talk about it, the more and more I also realize that it's far too original and interesting for Games Workshop to do at this particular point in time. Heavy theatrical sighing noises. Nevertheless, I suppose we can take some solace in the idea that there is such an awesome little insectoid alien species out there in the galaxy, even though, in all due likelihood, we are never going to see them. And hey, as an added benefit, I do suppose that makes this video very copyright friendly. Since not only do the QOrl not have any real art, they're barely even mentioned in the 41st millennium right now. Still, if we return for a moment to the military threat that they could potentially present the Imperium with, they would probably be the actual leading danger. First and foremost, due to their close vicinity, and the fact that the Imperium doesn't really have the capabilities to go after an alien species like this right now. They are plenty busy with the Great Rift, and the last time they tried to launch a major military campaign against a major faction, that was of course the Damocles Gulf Crusade, which I absolutely hate, because the Tau have plot armor meters thick. There is no way the burgeoning Tau Empire should have been able to resist a true-scale Imperial crusade that had already demonstrated the willingness to simply plaster entire planets from orbit. Not like these were ex-Imperial planets either, they could simply just have done drive-bys, essentially, on each and every inhabited Tau world, exterminating them as they go, but no. For reasons of plot bullshittery, they are required to actually go and fight the Tau in the manner that the Tau prefer, basically so that the Codex book can be full of things like, oh my god, look at this little retard species beating the hell out of the Imperium, how kawaii is that? Whereas the QOrl could actually be a little bit of a mix between the Tau and the Terranids. On the one hand, an absolutely immeasurable horde faction that would be able to overrun heavy emplacements by simply expending all of the ammunition within the emplacements, and then, thereafter, deploy elite strike quads of winged warriors that sweep down on the top of bunkers with pile driver-like weaponry that hammer down through the roof and blow up emplacements with heavy firepower. That could really genuinely be something interesting. Anywho, I shall begin wrapping it up there, so I hope you've learned something new and interesting about one of very few Xeno species in the 41st millennium that are actually genuinely worth talking about. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Until then, have a good day.